According to reports shared by the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans, defined benefit pension plans across Canada are facing systemic vulnerabilities so severe that plan sponsors are finding it increasingly difficult to meet their promises to future retirees. How much of your hard-earned, lifelong retirement security is scheduled to evaporate as a direct consequence of this shifting fiscal reality? How many dollars have already been silently stripped from your purchasing power while you navigate the complex web of inflation, taxation, and corporate plan insolvency? The data reveals that as the Canadian population ages and investment performance slips, corporate sponsors are facing an uphill battle to secure the extra cash required to adequately fund these structures, triggering a quiet panic from Bay Street to Main Street. For Canadian seniors who spent decades operating under the assumption that a defined benefit pension would form an unbreakable bedrock for their golden years, this fundamental breakdown in pension solvency marks the beginning of an irreversible retirement deficit. A user going by the name @Robert_ON shared that his corporate pension forecast has drastically failed to keep pace with the real-world inflation destroying his monthly budget in Ontario. Another user under the handle @Mary_BC expressed profound distress over how rapidly rising provincial living costs have rendered her supposedly stable retirement income completely inadequate. A user under the handle @Retiree_Alberta commented that the transition from reliable defined benefit structures to volatile capital accumulation plans feels like a betrayal of the multi-decade contract between employers and hardworking Canadian citizens. These voices highlight a chilling truth. The macroeconomic instability currently unfolding across the country is not an abstract concept confined to legislative chambers in Ottawa or executive boardrooms in Toronto. It is an immediate daily crisis impacting real people who have run out of time to rebuild their asset bases. The core of this systemic vulnerability lies in the structural transition away from defined benefit pension plans toward capital accumulation plans. When a defined benefit plan struggles, the employer bears the ultimate financial burden to fulfill those fixed obligations. However, economic volatility and market corrections are forcing organizations to systematically abandon these frameworks. In their place, capital accumulation plans leave both sponsors and participants to contribute funds that are ultimately left entirely to the mercy of volatile global financial markets. This represents a massive unannounced transfer of risk from corporate balance sheets directly onto the shoulders of individual Canadian retirees. If the markets experience a prolonged downturn or if the underlying fund management underperforms, it is the senior who suffers a catastrophic loss of income. It forces an alarming question into the consciousness of every senior. Will your capital accumulation plan actually provide adequate retirement income, or will you outlive your savings before you reach the end of your life? The crisis is deep enough that federal, provincial, and local governments are actively legislating temporary and permanent funding and solvency relief just to prevent immediate collapses. From British Columbia and Alberta to Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, provincial regulatory bodies are scrambling to patch the holes in a fracturing system. But this government intervention introduces an entirely new layer of risk for retirees. When governments provide solvency relief to corporations, it often means allowing those corporations to defer mandatory payments into pension funds, leaving the overall system underfunded for longer periods and increasing the risk of benefit dilution. This reality exposes a dark truth behind government intervention. Legislative relief is frequently designed to protect corporate stability and broader economic metrics rather than guaranteeing the full, uncompromised payout of your monthly pension check. At the exact same time that corporate pension stability is eroding, Canadian seniors are being pushed into the OAS clawback trap. The federal government indexes benefits like OldAgeSecurity and the Canada Pension Plan to the Consumer Price Index, which on paper looks like a positive adjustment. However, this nominal increase creates a dangerous fiscal illusion. As your total nominal income increases due to inflation adjustments, it can inadvertently push your total annual earnings past the strict recovery tax threshold. Once you cross this line, the Canada Revenue Agency implements a devastating 15% silent tax clawback on your OAS benefits. This means the very system designed to protect your purchasing power from inflation is simultaneously being used to claw back your social safety net, triggering an inescapable benefit dilution that leaves you financially worse off in real terms. This institutional erosion is compounded by the severe budgetary strain created by mandatory provincial healthcare costs and insurance premiums. Whether you are dealing with the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, British Columbia's Medical Services Plan, or Quebec's Régie de l'Assurance Maladie, seniors are discovering that provincial coverages are shrinking while out-of-pocket expenses for non-insured medications, specialized care, and long-term residency options are skyrocketing. When you couple this with the unrelenting inflationary pressures of the carbon tax, the daily cost of basic survival becomes unsustainable. A 3.5% inflation rate is not just a statistical index. It translates directly into choosing between paying an exorbitant home heating invoice during a brutal winter or funding a critical prescription that has been deregulated from provincial coverage lists. The daily trip to regional grocers like Loblaw or Sobeys has transformed into an exercise in wealth erosion as basic food staples consume an ever larger portion of a fixed, heavily taxed pension income. Furthermore, the mandatory RRIF meltdown regulations imposed by the Canada Revenue Agency create a compounding financial crisis for retirees. Once a senior reaches age 71, they are legally required to convert their registered retirement savings plans into registered retirement income funds, forcing mandatory minimum annual withdrawals. This policy completely ignores whether the stock and bond markets are up or down, forcing you to liquidate assets and deplete your principal investment balance even during severe market downturns. These forced withdrawals artificially inflate your taxable income, which not only subjects your remaining savings to higher marginal tax brackets, but also actively triggers the OAS clawback mechanism, compounding the speed of your asset depletion. It is a highly efficient wealth extraction cycle managed by Ottawa that systematically targets the exact pool of capital you rely on to survive. To survive this hostile economic landscape and achieve genuine wealth preservation, Canadian seniors must shift away from passive reliance on institutions and toward aggressive legal risk mitigation strategies. One primary defense mechanism is the strategic maximization of the tax-free savings account. Unlike a RRIF or a traditional pension, corporate payouts and market gains generated within a TFSA are completely immune to federal income tax and are entirely excluded from the calculation used to determine the OAS recovery tax threshold. Shifting capital out of fully taxable environments and sheltering it within a TFSA represents one of the few remaining avenues to generate liquidity protection without triggering a devastating government clawback. Another critical pillar of risk mitigation involves restructuring fixed income assets to combat purchasing power evaporation. While traditional Government of Canada bonds or standard fixed term guaranteed investment certificates have historically been viewed as safe havens, their real yields after accounting for true inflation and income taxes are often negative, resulting in a guaranteed loss of purchasing power. To counter this, advanced risk management strategies often involve the utilization of prescribed annuities to establish guaranteed lifetime cash flow baselines that insulate the individual from corporate pension insolvency risks. Additionally, reallocating capital toward high-quality Canadian dividend aristocrats, companies with multi-decade track records of consistently increasing their payouts, can provide a growing stream of income that naturally hedges against carbon tax-driven inflation without requiring the ongoing liquidation of core investment principal. Ultimately, the traditional Canadian dream of a secure, stress-free retirement funded by an employer pension and protected by federal social programs is being dismantled by economic volatility and aggressive taxation policies. The financial systems you were told to trust are prioritizing their own institutional survival over your personal wealth preservation. You cannot afford to remain passive while inflation, mandatory RRIF meltdowns, and legislative benefit dilutions erode the capital you spent a lifetime accumulating. Every single dollar left exposed to these structural vulnerabilities is a dollar at risk of permanent confiscation. As the Canada Revenue Agency prepares for its next cycle of regulatory adjustments and provincial healthcare strains continue to escalate, you must critically examine your current portfolio structure. How much of your retirement income is truly insulated from corporate insolvency, and how close are you to stepping directly into the OAS clawback trap? Take a hard, objective look at your provincial tax bracket, evaluate the resilience of your current investment vehicles, and leave a comment below explaining exactly how you are restructuring your retirement budget to defend against these escalating financial pressures.